men rising up to end the silence around us about the chains that bind us, to dispel the darkness of illusion with luminous spiritual technologies to finally become the hero within us all. I am Karuna Avatar Das. With me is my dear co-host Jai Jagannath Prabhu. This is episode 38 of Arise, the Honest Man's podcast, and it is episode 7 of our Conscious Relationships series. We are joined by two very special individuals, Abai and Ashley, and I must say, it has taken us a moment to get them here, and we're super, super, super grateful that moment has finally arrived. Abai and Ashley have 5 kids, and when you have 5 kids, then
you're
putting
basically
aside
a progenitor.
Putting aside 2 hours of your life to talk on a podcast is a big thing, and it requires planning. So anyway, the moment has finally arisen, and we are so just overjoyed to get into this conversation. Abai and Ashley have a very unique story, and they're Abai is one of the deepest guys I know. He's just he's so articulate. He's so down to earth. He's so filled with realization and a sense of contentment. And this is the first time that I'm meeting Ashley, but a guy like Abai couldn't have married someone not super special. So we're so happy to meet Ashley as well, and to get the opportunity to hear from them both.
Jai, thank you for coming on.
To be here with you. Even just spending time talking to the two of you and associating with the two of you is very nourishing for us. So this is going out to the world, and we're looking forward to everyone else also joining in. But just being with you two is worth the trouble of finding a babysitter who will take care of 5 kids, which is there's a very small pool of babysitters who are willing to do that.
Nice. Jai. Well, now that we've got through all the Vaishnav introductions, which are super sweet, let's start where we always like to start is your story. Like, how did you guys meet? And from the meeting point to the point, yeah, let's get married. Like, how did that unfold?
Yeah.
I know you guys met in the university, right? I'm pretty sure you met in school, right? Okay.
We met in school. So, Abai is actually a little younger than me. And what happened was we're just gonna backtrack just for a second. So yeah. I graduated high school. I was so happy to be done with high school, kind of wanting to walk away, not even concerned with carrying any relationships with me. And then I went right to work in a doctor's office, and I did sign up for college classes because that's what you're supposed to do when you get out of high school. So I was working and in college, and after a semester, I decided I liked working more. So I continued at the doctor's office and I was doing well. And, I kept doing that for a while. In the meantime, one of the doctors asked me to become their nanny. So I said, sure, I'll do that for a little while. I did that for a little while, and they happened to be super encouraging. They were just really kind, professional, but also kind of you're from a small town, but there's so much in the world. And I appreciated that encouragement from them. And I also had been in a place of spiritual searching. I had been going to church with my grandmother more. And I remember in high school, saying to some of my friends, shouldn't we be going to church or doing things like that?
Whoa.
So anyway, while I was a nanny, I got a lot of encouragement from them. She was really strong in her faith, and he was a little wavering, but she was like, no, I know the Lord is going to like work in, his favor. And I just keep praying for him. And she was just such a loving wife. But after taking care of a baby for a while, I decided it was time to go back to school, and with their encouragement also. So I signed up for classes for the fall, and I went back to work part-time at the doctor's office, and I was arranged to be in one class, English class, and then it got changed. And so I didn't go the first day. And the second day the class was available, I walked in, the seat available was the one in front of Abai. So that's where I sat, and I turned around and I said, what did I miss the first day? And that's how we met.
This sounds like a teeny pop, TV show, like the beginning of a teeny pop TV show.
Yeah, kind of. We both grew up here in Alachua. So I grew up, of course, as part of like the devotee community, and actually grew up also in Alachua, and so had heard about the devotees and had some devotee friends in school and all that. Yeah. But in 11th grade, I dual enrolled, meaning that I started doing college classes early, basically. And I tested up for English while I was doing college English, and actually took some time off after high school. And so got back in doing the same college English course that I was doing.
Yeah.
And so we met in that class.
Wait, so you were you of legal, like how old were you?
When we met, she doesn't like when I say this. She likes to like fluff around with the dates. When we met, okay. I was 15 and she was 19.
Whoa. Okay, cool.
But we were in college. I did not ask you how old you were.
Right, true. We're not trying to indicate anything. I was just curious about that.
Yeah.
Abai. Okay. So Ashley turns around in the lecture hall, right?
Yeah.
And like you look at her, like, did you get the fluttery feelings then already? Did you know that there's something here? Like in that first moment?
I mean, you're 15.
I was 15.
You're only 15.
I was 15. Ashley's like demeanor was immediately attractive to me. I had, so growing up, go to high school, you meet all kinds of girls. I was never like promiscuous or like into girls or like a flirter or that kind of thing. And so I was kind of like mostly like the reserved kind of guy in school, and I still have that kind of nature. But Ashley's nature was also very like sweet and gentle and kind and not pretentious and not bombastic and not trying to be more than she was, or kind of like put on a certain persona or something like that, which was kind of, the trend at that time, and I think has continued. And that was very much attractive to me. But she was clearly older than me and like very beautiful. And I was like, oh, like I didn't think that there was any chance really at the time upon first meeting. That kind of emerged a little bit later.
Okay, so
how did it escalate?
Yeah. So what happened after that?
Well,
actually, Abai, when someone asked me that same question, were you attracted to him right away? He had, he's very articulate, like you said, and it was English class. So he would read out loud. And I became attracted to hearing his voice. Like, I know that sounds silly, but
it doesn't sound silly to me at all. I love his voice too.
Yeah. I was like, can you read? Like when she was asking volunteers, can you read? And then he was also just so kind, like no one I had ever met. Also, just genuine and kind, and true to who he was. I knew he was a Hare Krishna right away. I asked him, "That is, are you a Hare Krishna?" I saw his neck beads in class. I had friends in school who were devotees, so I knew, the neck beads, and I knew the different names. Also, I have to give credit, just really quick, where credit is due to Srila Prabhupada's books. Sorry, because I had given a friend a ride home who was a devotee, And his dad was like, you have to take a little prasadam. And then he came and he's like, you see this book? And it was just Srila Prabhupada's books. He didn't read it to me or anything, but he just had me look, and he was showing me. He actually mostly spoke Spanish, so he couldn't fully have a conversation with me. But you never know what just like a moment of prasadam or a book will do, because I was searching. I wanted a relationship with God, but I wasn't an intellectual. So I would say what Abai then opened up for me was further conversation. And I would say our friendship started with me being able to ask him so many questions and him give me answers that no one else was able to give me.
That is beautiful.
So that's how you guys started engaging with one another more in the context of like discussing spirituality.
A lot of conversation. Yeah, we would be on the phone for hours and hours, and my head would get hot because my cell phone was like dying because it was a 3-hour conversation in 2005 or something. And the first birthday present Ashley got me was a timer, because I would joke with her that when we were on the phone, like, I'm going to put you on a timer because this conversation is lasting forever, and like I've got homework to do. So like one of the first birthday presents Ashley got me was a timer to kind of like, anyways, the relationship was a lot of conversation at first about, material things and spiritual things, but a mix of both. Yeah.
So you're 15, you're Ashley, you're 19. So how does it turn into something more? Because like I'm thinking like conventionally speaking, it's like kind of taboo if you're not yet hit the 18 age mark to have anything serious with someone who's older. And then also from the devotional community perspective, I have more questions about that. So there, like, how is it that that you're able to like say like, wow, there's something meaningful here, and maybe we should pursue this more deeply?
That's a good question. There were a lot of obstacles to us getting serious with each other. One is the devotional community aspect, like you mentioned. I grew up, I loved my parents, and at the same time, just like I would be with a 15-year-old kid, they were, concerned that I wasn't getting into serious relationships and wanted a devotional future for me and all that kind of stuff. And on the surface, getting together with an older non-devotee person seems contrary to those things. Like Ashley's friends group wasn't super supportive because I'm just this like 15-year-old kind of like idiot, like, and they Ashley's friends and existing relationships and family also had some concern. And like, also I'm like a Hare Krishna kid, and her family mostly is, the kind of traditional Southern American kind of like Christian family. And so that
I can picture it. I'm just picturing it.
That was an obstacle too. And like another thing, I used to wear like earrings. So like just, walking into like her dad's house for the first time wearing earrings, which is just like, who are you? And what are you doing with my daughter? And why are you interested in him? Anyways, there were some obstacles, but kind of, I would say, almost miraculously, each of the obstacles, not without endeavor, but I should say the counterbalancing thing to that was like our interest in and sense of certainty in each other. And so that really pulled us through. And so like, for example, in encountering each of those obstacles, the place that we encountered them from was a place of certainty in each other and of like willingness to tolerate whatever needs to be tolerated to break through. And I think that showing up in that way actually minimized the obstacle itself. You know what I'm saying? Like, like there's a commitment here. There's a willingness and a dedication here to persist. So then like the obstacle in whatever form that manifested almost just like gives up at the outset, because the kind of the determination of the people involved is kind of evident. You know what I'm saying?
Right. So at this juncture, you two must have been, I mean, to overcome those kinds of obstacles that you were facing, obstacles that were pretty substantial. Like, you must have had a very substantial degree of certainty that this is what you two wanted, right? So, like, at which point, like, how soon, and what was the moment when you realized, like, we're really sure about each other? Because only after that point, surely, could you have mustered the kind of courage to deal with these circumstantial difficulties.
Yeah. I'll speak for myself really quickly that it was, I guess, relatively early. And also, like, the kind of culture of relationships that I was brought up with was that, like, you commit, like, that's what you do.
Right.
Like, if compatibility is there and interest is there and affection is there and attraction is there, and you can see a future with the person, then, like, in other words, that commitment isn't something that you kind of delay towards the end of a long process. It's something that you introduce into the relationship relatively early. And so that, I'd say, was kind of my approach from relatively early on. And that had been the culture that I had imbibed regarding, romantic relationships.
Yes.
That, like, commitment is fundamental. It's not the outcome of a long kind of, like, courting process or something like that, or, like, testing the relationship for years before committing. It was something. It's a necessary ingredient for a relationship to become successful in the first place. And so, yeah.
So you were like
Actually,
15 and a half.
No, we like dated and hung out a little bit for a while.
Before we were, like, committed, we like, those phone conversations lasted a long time before we were like, I like you.
Yeah. So there was some period of that. Yeah.
Okay, Ashley, I'd love to hear from you, but I just want to take a moment to appreciate just, like, the power of growing up in a particular culture that has, strong values. Like, Abai, I mean, I know that, you weren't necessarily, like, full-on devotee from the very moment you opened your eyes, but just the fact that, you had that, like, that influence, and that, that was deeply embedded in your psyche and your kind of frame of reference. That's really cool. It's really cool.
Yeah, I really appreciate that about Abai, and I appreciated that then, because it was hard for me to. I had a lot of friends who were like, this can't work. Like, he's just a kid. Like, this can't work. Like, what are you doing? You're gonna spend some years, waste this time, and then realize it's not gonna work. And I had a friend who was also very Christian, and she came to one Janmashtami that we visited. And she ended up saying something about Abai's dhoti, and I was like, I think you should leave.
Oh my God.
Amazing.
I didn't know that. That's so funny.
Yeah, I was like, I think you should just go home. And I would say my one supporter was my sister, who was just like, she could see how kind and gentle Abai was, and how happy I was, and just fulfilled inside. And she encouraged it, and I appreciate that from her so much. Who she herself is very much a Christian, and her husband too. But she could see I was happy, and she encouraged it, and I really appreciated that. But yes, back to Abai's values. We would have some pretty deep conversations, and I would say, well, I'm going to want to get married before you, and how is this going to work? And there were a couple times where I was just like, yeah, I don't know. And we even took a little break, actually, from talking to each other, just to see, I just needed to think about things and really see. And I would say that we came back stronger after that point, after that conversation. Yeah. And I think that it really just became solid, and no, this is what I want. And I also spent some time, because we were in college, so we took a college religion class, and we had to visit a place of worship other than our own. So I chose to visit the temple, but I asked him not to come. I just wanted my own perspective and opinion without him being right there, and like looking over, thinking, I like him. I really want to like this. Do I like this? So I went a couple times to the temple, and you remember me asking you not to come. I'm going to go to the temple today. Please don't come today. Because I wanted to be there on my own. And
he's like low key in the back with the binoculars.
You actually respected that wish. You didn't come. So just seeing the deities, taking that in, it took me a little while, I think especially for that part, the deity worship, to grasp that. And like I said, it wasn't intellectual, so it wasn't like listening to class that did it. But what I will say about the devotees is their values. So what Srila Prabhupada brought is so simple. No meat eating, no intoxication, no illicit sex, no gambling. So by the devotees having these qualities, it makes them special. There's something special when you go to the temple. There's something different. And I was looking for that. I couldn't understand the Sunday Feast lecture. I couldn't grasp it.
Absolutely not. Yeah.
But,
same experience when I went first to the temple. I'm like, what is going on? This is wild.
Yeah, exactly. But there was something about the devotees that no one else had, and something I was looking for, and it was filling me up. It was filling me up. I had, my childhood was okay, but my parents were separated. They weren't in church all the time. I saw them struggle with intoxication. I saw them struggle with different things, like faithfulness in certain ways. And I saw that it's the same thing. You go to church, which is beautiful, but if you don't take it home, then there's not that liveliness that if you walk into the temple or you walk into a devotee's home and they're practicing even a few of the regulated principles, there's something different. Maybe they're still struggling with some, maybe they're still working on something, but there's something different because they are trying. Abhai's Gurudev says to try is bhakti. So there's bhakti in the house. And you feel that, especially when you don't grow up a devotee. You're like, there's something here. And Abhai had that, his friends had that, the temple had that. And I would say that really helped me. Like, I would sit by myself and think, wow, that's a different life. And I kind of wanted something different. I just did. And I could feel that. So it just took having the courage to make that choice with Abhai, because he was my first guru in a way. And so I can appreciate him even just individually, like as Abhai, and what he can offer, and what a friend he can be, and what an example he can be. He's more intellectual than I am. He can remember Shastra. Those things are beautiful. That's so helpful. I need that help. If you give me some rules to follow, I'll try to follow them. I want to do that. But retaining that information is hard. So he's such a great example in that way. And he was true to himself, even at a young age. When teenagers are being teenagers, he still was holding on to that part of himself, which I really appreciate.
This leads me to a question. It's for both of you, but coming from different angles. Because, one of the questions that I get asked all the time is, I got to marry a devotee. I got to look for someone within the devotee community. And they're very like apprehensive about exploring relationship with someone outside of devotional community. And so here you have a relationship where that worked. By like in your head, was there this sense like I have to like convert her, like bring her to the safe side of Christian consciousness? And I actually, from your side, did you feel any pressure to like convert or conform to Christian consciousness in order for you to feel safe that the relationship was going to be successful or it was going to work? Like, how did that dynamic play out? Because I think that would be kind of interesting for people who are not finding relationships in devotional communities or not having experiences like you where they feel inspired by the devotees around them. So that leads them to be a little bit more open, but then they're like scared. And okay, if I get with this person, I have to convert them. And it creates all this like subtle tension in that process. So I'm kind of curious about that. Like, from your side, I got to convert her. I can't literally see you doing that, but I'm just asking, just for the sake of asking. And Ashley, from your side, did you feel any tension to like conform to Christian consciousness in order to feel safe in the relationship?
Yeah. Well, I'll just preface this by saying, we were young, and a lot of our relationship developed kind of based upon like intuition and
right, sure.
And now reflecting on it is honestly a little bit of a funny exercise, because it feels and felt very kind of natural and step by step in the maturation of the relationship. I did think about that though, and we did talk about that. I guess the one thing I'll say, which is true, is that it was important for me to commit long term to somebody who would support me in Christian consciousness. And so I think that was the main thing that I was looking for, and that actually provided more or less from the beginning. It was also, I guess, important in hindsight for me to see Ashley's kind of directional trajectory from a Christian conscious perspective. Not that she adopted a devotee name and like started aspiring for a particular guru before we got serious, but like her directional inclination for Christian consciousness was important in hindsight and very confirming in hindsight for me to see, which was one of appreciation and of desire and of attraction for different, I guess you could say, ingredients of Krishna consciousness, whether that was prasadam or coming to Wednesday night bhajans and kirtans, which was happening here in Alachua at the time. And, I think was fundamental to many relationships developing in this area. And to going to the temple and these kinds of things. And so seeing her very positive and her positive reaction to those things was very confirming for me, even if it was a directional indicator as opposed to like her, achieving some kind of particular like milestone in Krishna consciousness or something. Yeah. Did you feel it from me?
I did.
Be honest. Yeah, I can't imagine.
Pressured. Also, like you said, with the Wednesday kirtan going on in Prasadam, like that was fun. That was fun. Like I was like these.
Yeah. That's like Bali quiche.
Yeah, exactly.
So like the kirtans were amazing too, like so good, so nice. And then all of the second gen devotees here from Alachua are just like really, wonderful people. And we had friendships, and like bringing Ashley into that circle of devotional friendships that also had like the traditional qualities of friendship, like banter and like ragging on each other, but also like supporting each other and doing Krishna conscious things with each other. That like mixture of friendship qualities is a very attractive thing, I think, for people to see from the outside, which is like most friendships outside of Krishna consciousness that I've seen, not to rag on everyone else or to downplay everything else, but like they're kind of like very give and take, self-centered. What can you do for me? And then I'll do that for you. They often don't have a spiritual dimension. Again, not categorically, but I think for Ashley to come in and see those kinds of friendships that I had the fortune of having was also an attractive thing.
You
for
had
you
nice,
to see.
nice friends. You have nice friends.
Yeah.
I don't sing unless it's for our duties, and I still cannot play cartels. And if I laughs at me in the kitchen, like if I'm in there trying, like
It's okay.
And I like look over at him like, well, then you get in here, you know. But I tried. But yeah, Prasadam was a winner. Kirtan was amazing. So I didn't feel pressured in that way. I did feel unqualified, to be truthful. And I doubted whether I would be a good partner for him. Would I be able to help him in his spiritual growth and his bhakti? I really felt like he was just on another level than me. And I was just, kind of waiting to see if that would like arise for him. If he would all of a sudden be like, oh, I don't know if, like we can advance more. But thankfully he was young and still just having fun doing kirtan. I don't know if, because I wasn't chanting japa at that time. I wasn't, listening to class all the time. I appreciated Prasadam a lot. I appreciated the Devotee Association. I thought the Sunday feasts were great. And, those things. But yeah, there was that apprehension. Even I would compare myself with the other devotee girls I would see. I was like, wow, they have a lot of beautiful qualities. These girls are so beautiful. It's like, how is he choosing to be with me? Like I would think things like that, because they are so qualified. And, even having devotee children now, I do see that, if you're born into a devotee family, you're coming with some qualities, even if you have some work. So,
right.
I saw that in them. I could see those things. So I appreciated that he was, helping me, because now also having kids, if they choose to date someone that's not a devotee, even though we did that, I'm going to be a little like, well, main thing is, are they willing to become vegetarian? Because what I see in relationships where there's a devotee and someone who's not, when their partner is not willing to become vegetarian and at least accept that one principle, I see they struggle a little bit when it comes to having children later, and then becoming a little lax with their kids. And maybe the partner's a little unhappy inside because it's not fully what they want. They love their partner, they're going to work it out, but sometimes it's confusing. Well, where is that going to leave the child when it comes, like what decision are they going to make? Like,
yeah,
I do feel like just my seva as a mom is, okay, you came in wanting to be a devotee and you have some qualities. It's my job to help you to a certain point. You're going to make your own decisions. But if you come home young with a boyfriend who's not a vegetarian, like, I'm going to check that for a minute. because I see as women, we give our heart. So I don't know what it's going to be like with our son, but I see women give their heart. So are you following him, or is he willing to explore your world a little bit? Is he willing to do that? That's really important.
Yeah.
You can be great Christians, yes, but I feel like just this one principle of being vegetarian really opens our eyes so much, and we have a different understanding, a different sense of compassion for all living entities. It really does do something. It changes the heart. So that's a big one, I'd say. And
love it. You have 4 daughters, so it's going to be a lot of checking potentially.
Oh, Krishna.
I have 2 more questions. I have 2 more questions, just unpacking your story, because we have like our standard relationship questions that we ask on every episode. I would like to get to some of those, but I have 2 more questions just unpacking your story, which I think are really interesting elements about your story particularly. My first one is more generic, like, the marriage, like how long before the marriage, and what was that sort of process like with the, non-devotee family and devotee family? Like, I'm kind of interested in that. And my second question, well, maybe we'll start there, but I do want to put my second question up because I think it's really fascinating. Ashley, Abai is a very unique Hare Krishna. Like, his parents, kind of part of one sangha. He grew up part of, in another sangha, and then he accepted a guruship from another sangha.
Yeah.
And that's a very unique type of Hare Krishna, and unique in the sense that you get to experience some tension around that. Or maybe, I don't know, because Abai is really good at harmonizing stuff within himself and around him, but there's some tension around that. So I'm kind of curious about, up to the marriage, like how long before you guys got married, and that's so dynamic between the 2 families, and the dynamic of navigating Abai, also Abai, how you navigated this sort of, because even that time when you guys got married, I think your Guru Day was still on the planet. He was coming to Alachua, and there was, there's tension, I imagine. So I'm kind of find that to be a fascinating element in terms of how that impacted your relationship.
Yeah. So in terms of the marriage, and I will give credit to our first daughter Sundari for many, many things, but one of the things that she did was that when she was conceived, she kind of immediately put a seal on our relationship. Like, we had, like, we were together for 3 years before Ashley got pregnant with Sundari, and we had our first daughter. But still at that age, there's the potential of the relationship breaking, or of priorities changing, or what have you. And so there's kind of like this underlying dynamic of like the potentiality for the relationship to maybe break in for one reason or another. Not that there were signs of that for us, but that's there. And so in early 2008, early 2008, when we got pregnant, when Ashley got pregnant with Sundari, I was 18, you were 21, and that was a initially very rocky period, and very kind of like stressful period for us. But the net effect of that was that it was the seal on our relationship and on our future together. Because, hey, now we're having children. This is serious. There is no option for us to not be fully committed to each other. And so then in the middle of the year, 2008, we had a very, very small wedding and married each other. And that was done like very privately. So we didn't.
Wow.
We actually still haven't like done any kind of like big wedding, inviting people and trying to involve Ashley's family and involving my family and friends and that kind of thing. We did something very simple, very private, but still very meaningful for us to kind of formalize that commitment.
Wow.
And so that was, and I have to give my parents credit for this also. Obviously it was a shocking news for them that, their 18-year-old son was going to be a father. But basically the immediate response, especially from my dad, was, okay, now you're together for life. And Ashley's going to move into our place. I was still living with my parents. And
wow.
so they opened the door to Ashley to have her move in, to kind of start to support us and give us a good foundation as now a new family. And that was very, very fundamental for us in the success of our relationship and our success as families, was the warm reception and invitation from my parents of bringing Ashley into the household, and my mom teaching her how to cook prasadam and how to offer things, and having our first couple of years under
I'm super
their
touched to hear that. I'm like, my heart is just touched to hear that. That's
absolutely
really
so
sorry,
beautiful.
Sorry to cut
Ashley,
you off.
yeah, I just want to know your experience with that. Sorry, Abai, were you going to say something else?
No. Go ahead.
What was your experience of that? Like,
I actually felt relieved because Abai was having such a hard time, especially. He didn't want to disappoint his parents, and they're good parents, and they have been so good to him. And it was hard for me to disappoint them also. I have to offer them my full respects and dandavats, actually, because they gave us such a foundation. So I was nervous to move in because they're devotees. They get up for their morning program, they chant their japa, they have their daily schedule. So, that was there. I was a little nervous, but I felt so relieved. Like, oh, I get to be with him, and we get to have this baby. And, like that was relief for me. I was also confused, and, a little nervous. But I would say once I moved in and I got to know his mom, and like I knew her, but like just seeing her daily practice and how she was with Abai's father, that example was so important for me. I didn't see that growing up.
Wow.
So I would say, to Sundari's credit, also when I was carrying her, I really thought about Krishna consciousness on a deeper level. So I want a relationship with God, but what do I want to give this child? And then I really thought about all the qualities that Abai had and everything his parents gave. And I'm like, it solidified it for me. Like, oh, let me try harder. Let me really, dive in a little more. And that, I would say, that was the real start of like my Krishna conscious like growth and journey. Like prasadam brought me in, kirtan is fun, but then when you really think about what you want for yourself, what you want for your children, it makes grow. I grew. I mean, you just, that's what happened. Yeah.
Beautiful. Okay, the other question. This part I think is super. This other question I feel like is becoming more and more relevant to sanghas around the world, because our sanghas are basically cross-pollinating, because we have friends from different sanghas. We're getting married to people from different sanghas and having children with them. And I felt like this is going to be more a standard thing. And so this sort of navigating like the sort of confluence of these different sanghas as embodied in a child or in a relationship. I'm really kind of fascinated by that. And Abai, like I said, you're in a unique position because your parents are kind of part of one sangha, and then there's like, you grew up in another sangha, and then your guru's from another sangha. So this is like prevailing, this confluence of like potential, like a lot of controversy. And then Ashley was kind of seeing that or being brought into that. I'm really curious about how you navigated that, and sort of maybe the wisdom you would give to other devotees who are in fact actually experiencing that today. I know for a fact some people who are experiencing that sort of meeting point.
Trying to think about a genuine yet helpful answer, because again, I'll just repeat. I kind of was joking about this with you and Karuna beforehand. I'm like, our podcast is basically going to be like we're really fortunate and like just winging it as best as we can. And I feel like that's actually the right answer to give to almost every question that you're answering. I can speak.
Oh, I'm going to speak for myself for a minute, because me coming into Krishna consciousness and it already being very different, and having my parents, what is this? You see them in the Rath Yatra, and then my friends wondering what I'm doing. When there was this, anything that was brought up about a different guru or a different sangha, I was like, what do you mean? They're chanting Hare Krishna. They're taking prasadam. Like, why is there this difference? Srila Prabhupada asked, Srila Gurudev to be there for him. Like, there's this friendship. So I didn't understand it. And Abai always guides me that if anyone is speaking ill-intentioned about anyone, if there's something you don't understand, then you just don't participate in the conversation. You don't participate, and you just, keep your own feelings. So thank you for that. I've been able to do that because of his nice instruction. And I think if someone has hurt feelings, it may be different. But I was coming into Krishna consciousness just appreciating everyone who's following. So for me, there's not a conflict. Even if someone would come and try to talk to me about it, I just would say, you know what, I don't really know. And I'm just happy, like, in my Krishna consciousness, I want to give my kids, or this is how we are. So,
Love that. I love that as advice. Listen, I don't know. I'm happy in my Krishna consciousness. And I want to remain that way.
That was kind of, I was going to say before, I wanted to say, but then I figured like Ashley was going to give this kind of answer, was that, she came into Krishna consciousness like neutrally, as like a completely clean slate. So none of those kinds of icky kind of controversy. It's just like, coming from where you were coming from, Ashley, that was completely irrelevant. It was like Kirtan and Prasadam, Hari Bol, the devotees are doing their thing and going to the morning program. That's beautiful. They're offering, they're offering to the Lord. Like, why actually get stuck on anything else?
But actually, I have to say props to you for keeping that irrelevant, because my lived experience is that it doesn't remain for very long. Once a person joins a particular sangha, they start hearing about this one or that one, and then they just like really like lean into that one angle of understanding and become quite like offensive and disrespectful of other sanghas. So the fact that you were able to be like, follow what Abai suggested to you, like, listen, I'm happy, y'all do you, but don't be coming over here disturbing my happiness. Like, props to you for being able to do that, because it's not an easy thing to do.
I just want to say we have some love coming in for Ashley. Nirmala Devi says, please tell Ashley I love and adore her, and I'm so happy she's sharing here. Haribol.
Okay, now we heard Ashley's side. What about your side? Because yours is a lot different, having grown up in a sangha, and it's a little bit more complex, I guess.
So I think most of the kind of like navigation of that was for me personally, and Ashley, to her credit, has more or less just supported and followed me in that regard, in terms of our, like, I guess, navigation of spiritual families and choosing association and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, one of the important things that happened for me in terms of like, my devotional progress and choosing to take initiation in different sangha was I had to shed, I guess, what were, in my experience, unhelpful conceptions around what Krishna consciousness is and what being a good devotee is. I had to shed some, I think, unnecessary social institutional considerations around that in the case that they became, and I was seeing them become unhelpful in terms of pursuing the essence of Krishna consciousness. And I want to preface all of this by saying that these dynamics occur in any sangha and any institution. That has been my experience. And I have found very favorable, inspiring, nourishing association in a whole variety of sanghas, both in the sangha that I took initiation in, of course, but also in ISKCON, and I still continue to find that. So that was kind of like one important shift to me. It's like to actually understand what the essence of Krishna consciousness is and to pursue that, and to be willing to let go of what might be kind of quasi-Krishna conscious considerations, or Krishna conscious related considerations, if and when I saw them as being unhelpful for me pursuing the essence of Krishna consciousness.
Abhijit, can you give just one example? Just one example.
Yeah. So like, for example, if I take so this is like a thing that I would think to myself. If I take initiation from Srila Narayan Maharaj, which was the thing I was considering and ended up doing, I will upset and potentially lose these friends, this set of friends, right? Or my friendship with this group of people, who I cherish and adore, will potentially be harmed. And so that's like one consideration that came to mind at that time. But then the counter consideration is like, but what is the upside? My Krishna consciousness and my eternal my eternal well-being will be nourished. That was my personal consideration as well. And so it took a little bit of fortitude to prioritize that over what are very real and tangible costs that I was anticipating experiencing. And a lot of that fortitude I received from other, I think, very helpful devotee association that I was having at the time to encourage me to prioritize things in the right way, meaning the more important kind of eternal benefit in terms of my progress in bhakti over ruffling some feathers, basically. And so that's one thing that definitely had to happen in my psyche was a clear distinction between kind of like, more eternal and essential principles of Krishna consciousness and Krishna conscious related things that may or may not be that may or may not be helpful in terms of supporting the more essential thing. Yeah.
Nice.
And some amount of faith that pursuing Krishna consciousness, even if that meant taking initiation in another sangha, which I did, would ultimately lead to the best result. And that has been my experience. In fact, I haven't lost really any of my friendships from ISKCON. Most of the devotees that I grew up with and that I had strong friendships with and that I was anticipating potentially losing, maybe there was a little bit of a hiccup, but most of those devotees are very sweet, reasonable devotees who have affection for me personally. And if anything, I've kind of expanded the family that I have access to, not given up one in exchange for another. That has been my personal experience, and I feel very grateful for that. And that's been my personal experience.
That's so fortunate, Abhay. That's so fortunate. Wow.
You say that, Karuna, like with the sound of like, that's so rare. That's what I heard.
Well, it's just like, like how many people are there that are genuinely able to put aside these kind of like external social pressures and then are able to, but still have like the kind of the tact, the sensitivity, and the wisdom to like retain like nourishment in all spheres, regardless of any like silly external political considerations. It is rare, I believe. Anyway, I have a question that's coming up for me now, which is like kind of changing directions quite a bit, but it's something that I'm really keen to hear about. And so Abai, this is kind of for you, actually for you both, because you're both gonna have interesting perspective, right? So, okay, so like Sundari is conceived. Abai is 18. Ashley, you're 22. You guys move in with Abai's parents, and so then, like, what exactly were you, Abai? What were you doing at the time, occupationally, and what was your journey to like individuating and taking like providership responsibility,
Yeah.
and like what was that whole process?
Yeah.
That's a good
So,
question.
I was getting ready to go to University of Florida, which is here in Gainesville, just outside of Alachua, and decided to put that on pause in order to like transition into my role as a father first, and to make sure that the time and space, I was providing myself with the time and space to kind of really imbibe that identity and develop that identity. And so occupationally, I was working part-time at Christian.com. And so, yeah, I was working there. That was bringing in a little bit of income, but my parents supported us.
But I worked all the way up until I had Sundari also at the doctor's
office. Yeah, that too.
Yeah.
And so, but my parents were supporting us, and we lived there for a couple of years, and obviously benefited from their support financially speaking. I went back to school, and when I went back to school, that's when we moved out onto our own and rented an apartment and lived together on our own based upon that foundation that my parents provided. But like assuming the role, this is something that I was anticipating coming up, is that I could not assume the role of kind of exclusive provider, which is the role that I play right now, on my own only. This was my experience, that I had to be willing to take on that role, but Ashley also had to be willing to allow me to take on that role. And this was, I can't think about, and I don't mean that like Ashley had to let me pay the bills. I mean that Ashley had to allow me to take on that role holistically of being the leader of the family, or in my specific areas and domains, and to let go of a desire, or of a desire to also play those things ourselves. Basically, we had to figure out what our roles were going to be, and where the boundaries between those roles were, and to fully trust the other person to occupy that role successfully. And that was something that did not exist at the beginning, and that we had to work through. And that, I don't know exactly when that took place, but that, when I think about our relationship, was a really important milestone for us to have a clear delineation of our roles in the family, and to be okay with giving up what we were now entrusting to the other person, and to entrust. And to trust that fully, like trust in the true sense.
Abai, do you feel like you were giving anything up? Like what were you giving up? Ashley was giving up like being a financial contributor and having a career and whatever. What was your sacrifice?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. I mean, I think for me, I was clear that was the role that I felt most suited to occupying. And like, although we have a lot of kids and I'm a very involved dad, Ashley is much better suited to cultivating the children, I'll say, and supporting them than I am, if I had to put it bluntly. We obviously are both involved parents and both involved in the upbringing of our children, but like broadly speaking, and I find ways to do this more and more, deferring to Ashley's judgment in terms of what our children need, and in terms of how the household should run, and giving up my preferences in terms of like, oh no, I want to do meals this way, and I want the house to be arranged and organized in this way, and this is like the physical setup for our house and all that kind of stuff. That I've tried to and mostly deferred to Ashley on, trusting her judgment on those things. And so that's something. that there's something there, because I can be a very particular person, and like deferring, for example, like my physical space in terms of our home to Ashley, it's a challenge for me in some ways, but like my experience, my lived experience has been that the more that I've truly given up attachment to the things that Ashley is responsible for and allowed her to take them forward without my interference, that all of those things have flourished more in terms of how the day is run at our house and how the children are disciplined and what standards we set for the children and how the home is arranged, all of these very, very important things. The less I've tried to be involved in setting those things without being invited by Ashley to contribute on this, like, hey, I want you to help me on this, for example. And all of those things have gone better. And maybe you'd feel the same way in reverse in terms of like, giving me full responsibility for finances and all that kind of stuff.
I'm definitely interested to hear about that. I just want to say that it sounds very traditional, what you just described, which I don't think is a problem. What I want to say and what I find unique is that although it's like traditional and that's sort of the template that we hear about, let's say in scriptures, and we saw a lot in the old world, it was still a process of personal discovery. And I still feel like in the process of personal discovery, even to assume the role, I'm going to be the provider, for example, there's a lot of sacrifice in that, just to be able to say, I'm going to do that. Because sidebar, I was talking to a friend of mine. This was about 3 years ago. He was about to get married. And my question to him was like, are you marrying a feminist girl or a Veda girl? we were having personal, I wouldn't talk like this in public necessarily, but we were in a room by ourselves, and I just asked him, are you marrying a feminist girl or a Veda girl? And he was like, I'm marrying a Veda girl. She's like, I'm trusting you with this responsibility. That's you. That's all you. I'm not going to contribute in the area. And I remember, and we were like joking about it. And I remember him saying, this really struck me when he said it. He was like, honestly, I wish she was more of the feminist type, because that's a lot of responsibility on me. And then it hit me like, wow, so much of our young generation, we're not willing to sacrifice the comfort of also like having like this equal position and stepping into like the leadership role. And I see it, that's not only in like relationships, but I see it like, let's say I'm here at the Bhakti Center, and if someone's like, hey, you want to be the leader? I'm like, nah, homie, I don't want to be the leader. Someone's like, you want to be the next GBC? Nah, I ain't trying to be the next GBC. So that like have the courage to step into a role like that. And then for Ashley to entrust someone, that's like a lot of sacrifice going on there. And even though that's like the standard traditional template, it's still a process of personal discovery. That's what it sounds like to me.
And we arrived on it in that way. What I would say is that our personal natures also line up with that kind of traditional standard. And if there was clear evidence that our personal natures didn't line up with that, I'm not sure that we would have kind of ended up in this particular arrangement. And so I think that being honest about the personal natures that we do and don't have, and using that to inform the decision is, of course, critical. And in our case, it ended up lining up and has ended up lining up pretty nicely.
Okay, Ashley, your experience, roles and responsibilities, and then like specifically like Abai initially being so young, being a dad, like did you kind of intuit? Were you peaceful? Like, were you peaceful throughout this whole unfolding?
No. No, because we have to be truthful. So Abai was young and he had a lot of growing to do, and I was young and had a lot of growing to do also. Thankfully, Krishna gave me a service. By having Sundari, he gave me my service, and I felt a sense of purpose. So it gave space for Abai to work and be in college and still continue to play soccer and still continue to go to class and like still even be with your friends sometimes. And I was alone a lot, but I wasn't alone because I had three. And I felt so fulfilled as a mom that I feel like he still got to do some things that he needed to do. And I feel like, and the more we matured in our relationship, especially us living on our own, then the sense of trust came in more and more.
Yeah.
And then you start to have real conversations with each other that you maybe didn't have before, where you need real honest answers. And you have to not be afraid of the person not loving you because of your honest answer. And that means sometimes your feelings get hurt, but you still choose at the end of the day, like we have this save it together, there's a bigger picture, an understanding of I'm not a perfect individual and you're not a perfect individual. And we are working on our whatever we've come with individually. So that took a while, that process.
Yeah.
And I would say that it was hard and emotional, but good.
Yeah.
Because by now, if I ask him something, he'll tell me, even if it's going to hurt my feelings. And I need that. I want him to do that. I want to process whatever it is that I've asked him about. I want to feel like, yeah, things are not always perfect, or this is what I need to work on, or this is what he's working on, and he needs the space to do that. And we're choosing to love each other with those imperfections. And our children need us to work on those imperfections, or to stand by each other, or to understand that we're not perfect. And I think when you can trust someone like that, when you know someone's just going to tell you even the ugly things, you're like, oh, they love me because they're not pretending. They're not pretending. So by being truthful like that with me, and then him taking on the role of going out in the world, which would be really hard for me, gives me a sense of appreciation for him and just valuing him for giving me that shelter. That sure, I'll hold down the fort and I'll be really busy and I'll take on these things, but you're giving me that support. You're giving me that ability to be in the home and to develop who I am and to develop these children, which is really important to me. So yeah. I don't know. I feel like that really helps a relationship sometimes, even if you're not the same person.
Yeah, I think a lot of successful relationships boils down to like actually relatively practical things. And when people get the practical things wrong, then even like a lot of, emotional compatibility or other kinds of qualities may not make up for practical deficiencies in the relationship. And that this is a good example of that, where it's like we're running a family, right? And that requires certain things to be done, certain jobs to be done if we want that to go well, and we don't want to be tearing our hair out every single day. And who is going to manage those different things? Who has the appropriate nature for those things, the skills, the interest and the inclination to do those kinds of things? Like, it's not that Ashley couldn't earn money, but like her nature would be is much less compatible with going out in the world and like being in a professional setting and like doing all the things that you have to do to succeed in a professional environment today. Not that she couldn't do it, but her nature and her interest isn't there to the degree that it is for me, which I kind of enjoy it. And so I think a lot of it is just like a practical analysis of like what needs to be done and who seems like the best person to do those different things. And again, it's lined up for us in a relatively traditional way. But I think it's somewhat practical. Last thing I'll say is that like responsibility for something is different than being the person who exclusively does those things. So like, for example, sometimes I cook meals at home, but it's Ashley's responsibility to make sure that meals are provided to the family, right? Just like the most basic thing, eating.
Right.
But so that means that like if she needs help, she can say, hey, Abai, can you make instant pot khichdi? Because that's the only thing I can make. And I'll go, sure, I'll make instant pot khichdi. So like I'm doing the thing sometimes, right? Like I'm doing her job sometimes, but it's her responsibility to ensure that it gets done.
Right, got it.
Asking me for help or arranging for it to be done in some other way. And it's also just like, I find personally, having shared responsibility of most things is usually a problem. It's usually much easier to have what's called, this like a business term, a directly responsible individual, DRI.
Yes.
That person is exclusively responsible for the thing at the end of the day. They can request collaboration and assistance and all these kinds of things to help get that thing done. But at the end of the day, somebody is the head. And so that's just like a little bit of nuance to add to this. It's not that we don't contribute to each other's areas sometimes, but that at the end of the day, one of us is responsible for each of these kind of major categories of things. And that makes things really clear and simple for us.
That's very fascinating. I think another area where your relationship is kind of atypical for the modern millennial and beyond standard of relationship is that you had children very young. So it was very apparent, I have a family to run, just using that language. And therefore we got to get real practical real fast. And it's from my observation, because I obviously don't have a family, but from my observation, a lot of couples are getting together and the children part isn't coming for whatever reasons. And I'm not saying that's a negative thing or anything, but it seems like it may be harder for such persons to crystallize or concretize some of these areas of direct responsibility when you don't really have a family to run. You could just kind of like relax and chill, and it could really be a give and take. So I guess my question here, which is one of the standard questions we ask, and it's already come up, but I'd like to hear more about it, is how the dynamics of your relationship changed or transforms after having a child. Now, we heard about Sundari, but y'all got 5 kids. And like I said, I'm gonna just reiterate, that's like, for our generation, that's literally progenitor standard of children making. And they're beautiful children. I've met all of them. They're amazing. And I want to hear about how your relationships transformed by having children. And I guess I also like to hear, or I may be interested to hear, kind of like, hey guys, like if you're going to do the relationship thing, have children. Like it's important for your relationship, you know, like it's going to really help your relationship maybe. Anyway, so like, okay, we heard about Sundari, and that was a big shift. We've been hearing a lot about that shift, but then comes the second and the third and then the fourth and the fifth. So that must have its impact in terms of the relationship also.
Yeah. I mean,
I just
had something.
I just want to say that like you guys are just so, it's like you're hitting me with like a tsunami of maturity and like groundedness. Like when I look at you, when you speak, your composure, like your entire demeanor, both of you, you're just like, you just really strike me that way, you know? And them kiddies got to do something with it, like no doubt, like all that responsibility that you guys have been accepting for like freaking how long? More than a decade now already, you know? And you're only like 30 something, you know, early 30. That's like unreal. Okay. So tell us, kids, 108.
Yeah, just to touch again on a couple of things. One of them is that the confirmatory quality to our relationship that us having kids had for us. I know that isn't the universal experience, but having children for us has had a kind of like further and further confirmatory quality for our relationship together specifically. And that has, you know, I think there are some dynamics to a relationship that only arise in an environment of exclusive commitment and holistic trust. And some of what Ashley touched upon already, is that when that sense of exclusive commitment and of trust is present, that allows certain dynamics to develop in the relationship that may not develop if there's any doubt at all in the long-term future of the relationship. And so that has been confirmed in multiple phases for us, and reinforced in multiple phases in different ways. But having children has been, I'd say, the main way that quality to our relationship has been established and has been reinforced. The other one has been this sense of urgency about making practical definitions and boundaries and roles for ourselves in our relationship, and not seeing each other as those roles exclusively, but creating that kind of practical definition in our relationship. Having children, just having a lot to do, has supported that kind of exploration and that definition, which has also been very helpful for us, practically speaking. It's created some challenges. I'll say that we haven't invested as much as I would like to into our relationship individually, outside of the children, or outside of like seeing each other as like the mother and the father. And that's something that we talk about sometimes, is that for us, a challenge that's happened is that like that is such a dominating part of our identities that sometimes become the only part of the identity that we think about or talk about. And like, even when we lay down and like are catching up together at the end of the day, talk about our children. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but like that's a very common point of conversation. And then sometimes there can be a long period of us not focusing on each other as individuals and as a couple, which is also, of course, very important. That's been a challenge that I've experienced, that we're trying to create more space for. Yeah.
Well, I want to hear from Ashley on this, but like this last statement just bringing up for me, this is gonna sound really awkward, but do y'all like explore things like, let's go on, like we need to go on a date?
Yeah.
Like, we need to go on a date. Someone's got to take care of the kids. We need to go on a date. Like, anyway, I guess that it never occurred to me that shifting into that role of parents could also not adversely, that's not the right word, but impact one's own relationship with their partner in ways that could potentially be unhealthy.
They can, and I think we've experienced that sometimes. There can be like a drift, because the family unit is one kind of component of our identity, but we also have our own individual identities, and we also have this layer of identity that is us as a couple. So there's like there's the layers of the identities that we have, and we have to invest in each layer of our identity appropriately for kind of holistically us to be healthy. And that layer of us as a couple has been the one that has most been neglected, I would say, just from a time in standpoint. And so we're conscious of that and attempting to address it. And it is as simple as investing time and emotional energy in that thing. It's not anything more than that for us, I don't think. But time and emotional energy are also precious resources that are difficult to come by sometimes.
Right.
So yeah, I think that there's that has been something it's been a challenge that's been created by having a large family that we're aware of. Yeah.
Nice. I mean, maybe not nice, but it's a subtle dynamic that unless you were married for a long time, it wouldn't occur to you. So it's nice that that's coming out as food for thought to consider for those who find value in these sorts of conversations. Ashley, what's your experience been like? The transformation of you through children and of the relationship through having so many children for our generation.
Well,
did you ever imagine, I just want to ask, did you ever imagine that you would, when you were younger, like when you were a teenager, did you ever kind of cherish or imagine the idea of motherhood and have that as like a definite kind of life goal, you know, before you met Abai? Was that like, yeah, that's totally going to be a thing one day? You know, did you imagine that you'd have 5?
I didn't imagine I would have 5. Yes, I did think about being a mother, though. I did. That was something I wanted, and that was important to me. I would say when I was a nanny, when they asked me to be a nanny for them, the doctors in the beginning I told you about, they had 3, and I realized that I wanted a family even more, but that it had to be the right person. And I saw that they had values. I didn't grow up with a functioning family. So I saw a functioning family. And that became important to me. And what I also appreciated about them was she was from Jamaica, he was from Greece. That a functioning family, like, I think you grow up with stereotypes. So I went back to school, I think, open to, not that I was going to meet my husband, but just more open. And meeting Abai, you know, there was no like, well, you need to check all these boxes. You know, you weren't this or you weren't that. My dad won't like your earrings, or, you know, something like that. You know, there wasn't any of that. And you can be from a different culture. You can be Indian. You can be, you know, whatever. And so I think broadening my mind helped. But yes, I wanted to be a mother, and I wanted just someone who had a good character and nice values and wanted something for themselves. I didn't have a lot of friends who were talking about wanting to be more religious, or even following their religion, you know, to a certain extent. And I just found that he was just still genuine in that, and I could really appreciate that about him. So in being a mother, or you know, developing myself with each child, it's gotten definitely more work and hard, you know, and hard in certain ways. But it's just kind of reestablished each time for me what I'm doing right now, what my seva is, what do I want to give to them, what kind of growth I want in myself. And especially with our last child, Ganesham, he's just turned 2, and I've been nursing for this long, and now we're getting out of that phase. And, you know, the first thing I'm thinking about is like, oh, when he sleeps through the night, maybe I can try to go to Mangalarti again. And I'm like, you know, so like these children, they're helping me with what I want and what's important. So I have to be thankful to them, even if it's hard work every day. Just, you know, like, they're little Vaishnavas. They're not perfect. You know, I'm helping them out with their things, but they're helping me too. I definitely have things that, you know, when we grow up in a certain way, or we grow up in a family dynamic that's not perfect, and we have to work things out when we're older, I think it helps establish our values even more, and get through those hard times. You know, some days are very long, some days are tiring, but I feel like what I'm doing is important and it has value. And I think for anyone, whether you have a lot of kids or you don't have kids, you're in a marriage or you're not, just if you can find something in the day that's important or has value, it's just going to help with so many things. If you're looking for a partner, to not maybe limit, are they already a devotee? Are they not? Do our values meet up? What are my values? What do I want? I would just say to be more open to accepting those things, and then yeah, we all have hard days, and then when those days come, thankfully we have Bhagavatam or Bhagavad Gita or Kirtan or something, but we can open up a book and read and refresh a little bit. I mean, that's my experience. Because sure, I feel some sadness sometimes, or I'll feel down or this or that, but I think just to use our tools, to use what we have, to appreciate each other, to value each other, to invest in, if we see a seva in front of us, if we see something in front of us that Krishna's given, especially if it's very apparent in 5 children, to just try to invest there, and pray that Krishna supplies the energy or intelligence you need for that, the intelligence for us to work on the challenges that come up. It's certainly not perfect all the time, but I would say, just respecting each other mutually like that and having those values are helpful.
Love that. I love how, you're just articulating that I'm not only helping them, but they're helping me. And I like to say, I've been saying this a lot to different friends, but having children is the highest form of activism. Because when you look at the world situation today, you just come to realize, like, wow, we are not good people. Some went wrong when we were growing up. So I don't want to keep you too much longer, because I know you have kids, 5 of them. So I think this would be my last thing, and it's always we somehow always end up with this, but it's kind of important. How do y'all fight? No, I'm saying that in a more joking way, but basically, what are the principles of, and I'm using this phrase because I picked it up from Danya, fighting fairly. And because it seems like a lot of couples, our devotional community included, haven't really figured out how to fight fairly or fight graciously, and it's led to the dissolution of the relationships. So what are the principles of surviving a fight or fighting fairly, and not allowing that to be the thing that dissolves a relationship or creates such a misgiving that it breaks?
That's a good, well, I mean, a couple things come to mind. One is that, prevention is the best form of treatment, right? And so, in a sense, us trusting each other with the domains of life that have clear boundaries around them, I would imagine has prevented a lot of conflicts, because it's just like, oh yeah, that's your area. Whatever you decide, whatever your opinion is there, I'm going to support that. So for example, if Ashley wants to buy something, for example, right? And she asks me, and I say hey, we can't do that right now because I'm the one who's managing our finances, and that's the reality of our situation. Then mostly Ashley's okay, and just defers to my judgment on that thing. And similar, on her side of the house, so to speak, in terms of being the primary caretaker for the family and for the household, which is obviously also a very, very important job. More or less, that's our default position. And that prevents a lot of potential conflicts, I would assume. And so there's something about that clarity of role and clarity of responsibility that we've spent time figuring out and articulating to each other and refining as we've gone along, that I think has a preventative quality to it in terms of conflict and in terms of arguments and such. Another thing for me, when I'm feeling kind of riled up about something, I'll often just give myself time and space to contemplate what I'm actually upset about, as opposed to running with my first instinct, because I'm usually wrong. I usually think I'm upset about something, but actually I'm either upset about another thing, or I'm not actually upset with Ashley at all. I'm actually upset about something else going on in my life, and I'm somehow tying it up with an interaction with her, or with something that she's done, or something that's going on in the family. Or I'm hungry and tired, and that's making me irritable, but I'm somehow or other, because the mind is stupid, the mind is going, well, it's actually you're upset with Ashley, and it's well, actually, let me pause and give the intelligence a little bit of space here. That's not what's going on at all. I'm just like tired and hungry and I didn't get a good night's sleep last night. Let's not take this any further than it needs to go to now that I've kind of properly identified what the source of my, emotional situation or frustration is. And that also has a preventative quality. So those are two things that come to mind for me of like, I think the clarity of roles prevents conflicts, and then like not trusting my first instinct whenever I'm feeling like Ashley is the culprit for something or Ashley is at fault, and giving myself some time and space to like truly think about that. Most of the time that cuts it at the root for me.
Yeah. Also, space for you works really well. Like Abai is really good about communicating to me. I've had a long day at work and I just can't handle all the energy right now. Like, because sometimes I'll be really loud in the house or a lot of energy with the kids, and I need to go in my office a few minutes and wind down and then come back out. And what I've learned over the years is when he takes that space, he's not saying, I don't love you and the kids. He's saying, right. I'm not going to be the best husband and dad I can be right now, and I need a few minutes. So I've appreciated that, because I think as like I can be sensitive sometimes, and it took me a little while to understand that. And I have friends also who's, maybe their husband or partner will be like that, and they'll feel so hurt. They'll take it so personally. So I think that just comes with time and having lots of kids, and also seeing kids work through their emotions.
Yeah.
Most of the time they need space. And I would say that took us a couple of kids for me to get that he just needed that space.
Yeah. Not every apparent problem needs to be wrestled with.
Yeah.
I think like there's like sometimes that culture of like, oh, there's an issue, let's talk about it. Like, let's have a reflective conversation,
Yeah.
and like maybe.
Or, oh no, you want to go in your room? I've had the kids all day. You have to stay out here too.
Yeah.
We have to think about, well, what is better for everyone really? Like for him to have some space and to come back out and be more present, or to make him stay out here. And he'll say that to me sometimes. Are you going to make me stay out here? And, so that's helpful.
Yes.
Some space.
Oh man.
Yeah.
I think this is a really really good, appropriate place to call it a day. It's been. Jai, is there something else that you want to ask?
No, that was my last thing, and I don't want to.
Like we could ask so many more questions, but I feel like this was it was such a rich. Jai, we've done 7 of these episodes, and like you'd think that like you'd kind of be like another conscious relationships episode, but every time it's just so
rich.
Golden.
That's rich.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you so much for coming, guys.
I literally at this moment take my hat off to you guys.
Oh.
Thank you.
You're incredible.
Literally.
Anyway, yeah. So thank you so much, you two.
Thank you
it
both.
was such an honor to have you.
It's so nice to be with you both and with everyone else who tuned in. Thank you so much.
I appreciate it also. I appreciate this program, and then Jai Jagannath through his other program. I've seen, it helps Abai so much. So I just want to say thank you for what you're doing for your seva, because all seva is important, whether it's 5 kids or distributing books or doing these podcasts or cooking in the kitchen or washing the dishes. They're all important, and we can be grateful. So thank you.
Thank you for that.
Hari. Okay, you too. Just stick on for a sec. I'm gonna end the broadcast. Thank you so much, everyone. We'll see you next week. Hari. We're gonna have our Ayurvedic Acharya next week, right?
I think so.
Jai?
Yes.
Okay, that's cool. Okay, we're gonna have an Ayurvedic Acharya next week. Okay, bye. Hare Krishna.